Mhm. All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the CDO's presentation on thriving in grad school. My name is Theresa Condito, and I'm the Assistant Director here at the CDO. I'm also very pleased to have with me today Bailey Westerhoff. She is an employer engagement specialist here with us, one of our wonderful student ambassadors, and very excited for her to share your wisdom with all of you on this presentation. And also we have Kajal Sheikh, and I'm so psyched to have her. She is responsible for many of you being here, as she is our wonderful social media and communication specialist. So very glad to have you helping out here today, Kajal. And so we will go ahead and get started. Bailey, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen.
All righty. Well, thank you again for joining us here. As Theresa let you all know, we do all work for the Career Development Office. And you might be wondering why the Career Development Office is hosting a webinar on thriving in graduate school. Well, there's a lot that can be done during your studies. While we do realize that being a student is your #1 priority, we want to provide you with some of the resources and tools that we at the CDO offer that can help you hit the ground running after graduation in your job search. A lot of the tools and resources that we do offer also can help during your studies as you learn to network, create better connections with your classmates as well as professors, as well as just prepare your own documents. So today our agenda is we're going to just kind of talk a little bit about grad school. We're going to talk a little bit about thriving over surviving, what's different about grad school, what's kind of normal that may seem a little unnormal, avoiding burnout, the CDO and career planning, as well as other resources on campus that can help you thrive in your time during graduate school. So again, we're talking about thriving over surviving. Sometimes in graduate school, it can feel overwhelming. There's a lot going on. You feel like your studies are a lot, but you also want to be preparing for your future. So again, today we want to be helping provide you with those resources to make sure that you can make the most out of your time here at CGU. So talking about what's different. So most of us, or all of us, have graduated from an undergraduate university at some point. And that undergraduate university and that experience may be a little bit different than what you experience at CGU. So one of a few things that we may experience are here. So one thing may be age differences. Undergraduate school, we're often just coming out of high school. We're all roughly 18 to 22, and we're all kind of in that same stage of life. Graduate school is a little bit different. So you may find folks who are just straight out of their undergraduate, going straight into their graduate, plowing through, knowing exactly what they want to do. You may also come across some older students who graduated with their undergrad a few years in the past, and graduated a few years in the past, but have returned to CGU either to further their skills that they already have or to make a completely different career move. What's great about these age differences is that it's often an opportunity for you to learn from students. So advanced students may have a few more skills than you, but they may help you identify the skills that you may need to work on, what you might like in a career path, and things like that. So it's really a blessing. We have a little bit of smaller social and professional circles. Again, a great thing. That means that you can make easier connections with your classmates as well as your professors. However, that does mean that during class, absences, lack of focus, being unprepared does become noticed a little faster. It is also noticed, or it's also noticed on campus. So we do have a smaller campus, sending emails around to different persons. Just know that we are kind of a tight-knit group. Seasonal breaks, they don't always mean spring break. They don't always mean Thanksgiving break. While we do, as students, need to take the time to care for ourselves, we may not always be given that time. So just be aware that sometimes breaks may mean projects, reading, and catching up on other things that you've been neglecting. Practical opportunities, it's not all negative. We do have a lot more in the practical area. So learning from different talks, different lectures. We do have professional development workshops all over campus, coffee chats, all sorts of these opportunities help you along in your career, as well as just kind of engaging who you are in your student. We have specialized learning often within our classes. We do see a lot more collaboration as well within our coursework. So be prepared to work with students in most disciplines. Many of the schools, as well as many professors, see collaboration as a way of preparing you for the workforce. In the workforce, you're always going to be collaborating with others. So this is a good way to kind of embrace the group work and just kind of take these skills and know that they will be able to be used in the workforce in your future. There is often also a focus on academia. Now, some schools, this may be a little bit more prevalent than others. It's great if you are in that focus. It's great because you have many professors to talk to, you have many students to talk to, you have a lot of people to relate in order to get to that faculty level position. Now, if you're not also into that kind of faculty route, that's okay. There are many students out there at CGU who are there for practical careers, going back into the field and not into a faculty role. So we do suggest that you meet with your advisors, meet with other students, and there's so many other resources to ensure that you can get the skills as well as the support you need as you make your transition into your future career. One final thing we did want to bring up is the reading. Now, yes, I'm sure we all did some reading in our undergrad, but it is one thing about graduate school that is very real. There's a lot of reading, but don't be afraid. There's strategies you can use to get through it. You can set up reading groups, kind of segregate the work with your friends, make sure you're chatting with your classmates to ensure that you're learning the key points of each reading. It doesn't have to be all you. So see your reading, but take it as a group work sometimes. It's something that can be shared and should be enjoyed. What's normal? So oftentimes there are some feelings in graduate school that you may not have felt in your undergrad, that may make you feel not worthy, may make you feel not up to par. So what we do find is that there's a very large, there's a high prevalence of imposter syndrome in graduate school. We're all pretty used to being either some of the smartest people in the room, some of the smartest people at our jobs, maybe in the highest positions, and we get into these classrooms with other folks who are just as smart, but maybe in different areas. And oftentimes that can create a feeling of the imposter syndrome, that you don't deserve to be there, you don't know enough, and it's just not true. Especially in graduate school, when we have such focuses with each of us having different focuses, we should embrace the knowledge that our other fellow students have and just remember we're worthy too. We do have a feeling of isolation sometimes in graduate school, especially at the PhD level, especially after coursework. So it's important to make sure that you're maintaining networks of friends, of students, people you can read with, you can work with, you can enjoy with. Make sure you remain connected. We do also experience a little bit of uncertainty or uneasiness. Now that's pretty normal for graduate school. It's meant to be ambiguous, almost to the point where it's confusing. But the ambiguity is something that we can take advantage of. It's something that allows us to embrace our skills, our interests, and our needs in our assignments and our work whenever possible. So look at the ambiguity as a chance to explore what you'd like. Now, finally, we do get a little bit of burnout. I'm sure most of us have heard of burnout. We've experienced burnout. I do love this meme here. Not sure if actually depressed or just in grad school. Not ideal, but we're working really hard. So we want to make sure we can provide you with some of the tools to identify this burnout. So what can burnout look like? Chronic fatigue, lack of productivity or detachment, anxiety or depression, increased illness, irritability or anger, insomnia, or even physical symptoms, often related to digestion or sleep. So these are just some of the things that we want to make sure we're looking for. If you have a change in anything during grad school, just make sure you're aware. Make sure we're remaining mindful of who we are and how we like to live. Now, avoiding burnout. There's a couple different ways that we at the CDO have suggested that you can avoid burnout. We can find a hobby, you know. I like to choose one that's outside personally, just because we often spend so much time inside, hunched over our books, our computers. So for me, any chance to get outside. Claremont has a tremendous campus with many gardens around. There's even a botanical area not far. So take a walk, explore, and a little inside tip, any fruit trees that you do see on campus, feel free to pick from those. They're meant to be enjoyed by our students. Set work hours. Make sure, especially in this pandemic times, it's been difficult for many people to kind of differentiate between work, play. So make sure you set work hours for yourself. Being a student is not a typical 9 to 5, so it's really easy to find yourself either working a little too much or not quite enough. Set a schedule. Change your surroundings. Just like finding a hobby, get outside. Change your surroundings. Find different places to study that suit you. Claremont is a great city as a whole. Explore the city. Build a community. This is one that I think is the most important. Not the most, but if not one of the most. Your community is everything. Being able to share struggles, successes, worries, hopes is really important. Find students that you connect with within your program and outside of your program. Time management. Improve your time management. And when possible, find shortcuts. Set realistic goals. We don't want to stress ourselves out trying to do too much. Make sure your goals are realistic, things you can accomplish. Change the conversation. This is something that I also think is really important. It's very easy to be negative, especially within our friend groups. You ask someone how you're doing and it's, oh, I'm tired, it's almost midterms, it's finals week, I'm just, change the conversation a little bit. Ask if they've read anything great lately, if they've seen a new YouTube video that they really liked. Change the conversation to something more positive, and that may not always be related to work, but that can relieve you a little bit. And then finally, just take care of yourself. Make sure you're eating healthy, make sure you're getting sleep. These are some of the first things to go in graduate school. We've all pulled those all-nighters. So just be mindful. And now I'm going to turn it over to Theresa to get a little bit more of our resources.
Yes, thank you so much, Bailey. So it's funny too, we're talking about taking care of yourself as I chug on an energy drink, but do as we say, not as we do, right? So let's see here. So Yeah, I definitely feel like I know it can feel like a lot of pressure at the beginning, right? And we're gonna one of the things you will I hope you'll get ready for is the bombardment of resources. But I'm glad to be starting that off here. So what do we do here at the CDO? Of course, there's the you can check out our website. We can throw the link in the chat. But of course, so professional development. What does that mean? So that's a pretty big kind of ambiguous goal, right? But what that can look like is developing your professional identity, sort of your own self-branding, if you will, potentially, identifying your top skills and where those skills gaps are, um, developing clear plans with measurable goals to fill those gaps. Because it's one thing to just say, I was working with a student the other day and they need to, they were given some feedback that they need more research. Well, boy, that's a little bit vague, right? That's certainly not measurable, right? So to really be building up and seeing how we can have a realistic plan to be filling skills gaps. And of course, we want to help you successfully launch and advance your career. So what does that look like? So of course, the career search. We have a lot of pieces to help you, which we'll be talking about when we get to the resources part right after this. But basically, we're here for you every step of the way. We meet you where you are and help you get to where you want to be. As Bailey mentioned, we do have a lot of students who join us when they're at different points in their career. I personally waited 10 years between grad and undergrad, so it's definitely a bit of a transition for me. But so things like basically working with you to establish these goals, right? I also have quite a few fun LinkedIn stalking tips and other things to really be seeing what folks with your major, what they go on to do, and folks in your profession, what sort of job titles they hold, and their career trajectories as well. So, of course, too, there's all the other pieces in that, right? The most common reason folks come to see us is um, oh, need help with my resume or CV and my cover letter. So, of course, that's the most, I believe that's the most popular reason we see people. But of course, sometimes folks end up coming in to get their resume looked at and end up needing to have a different conversation. So, we're really totally open. We'll talk about booking and handshake later, booking appointments with us. But really, the type of appointments, we're really open and willing to help you wherever you are. So, of course, too, another thing, so as I mentioned, so helping every step of the way, right? So identifying, the careers you want, starting to network, starting to apply, and of course, landing those interviews, right? We do some mock interviews here. And with that, we do ask that you send us the job description and whatever materials you had applied with. And personally, I do my best to ask you the toughest questions I can because I'd prefer you to mess up with me than to actually mess up in the interview. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone tell me that their interview was harder than mine. I know that sounds like you wouldn't want to come and see me, but I really feel that, again, just trying to get you ready, trying to prepare you for those situations. So let's see here. So we've got that. And of course, even after that, hopefully comes that job offer, right? And we have a lot of tips and materials on salary negotiation as well. So to touch on the resources that we talked about, so we do have a career roadmap, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. It's a very intensive document, but I think it can be really helpful. We also have a faculty career roadmap in terms of, as Bailey mentioned, many folks at CGU are interested in pursuing the academia route. Of course, we've got timelines for getting your MA or MS. And as Bailey mentioned, there can be some challenges for post-coursework PhDs. So in addition to timelines and resources we have for, quals and all of the other pieces that come into your PhD, we also have we hold a webinar, or sorry, a conference every year called, it's the, what is it? What is it? Bailey, do you remember the name? Is it re-enrollment? I'm forgetting. Oh, reorientation. That's it. Sorry, forgive me, y'all. Reorientation for PhDs, when we say, hey, okay, you're done with coursework. What happens now? And we try to really make sure that we're here for you and help you throughout that process too. So let's see here. So there's also a whole lot of other resources on Handshake, which is our career services platform. And we'll be getting into all of the different platforms we use. Again, I'm going to research a little bit later. But yeah, just overall in general, I want to let you know that we are here to help. We're here to support you. Currently, right now, we're in leadership transition, but you can book meetings with myself and also our wonderful student ambassador, Rebecca Grimm. She's fantastic, wonderful counselor here to help you out. So both of us are working hard to make sure we can meet with all of you. So as I mentioned, right, these are all of the categories that you can choose in Handshake when you book an appointment with us. But as we mentioned, if we need to talk about a couple things, we'll do what we can, right? Sometimes we go over time. We'll keep booking those meetings, right, until we get you to a point where you're feeling more confident in your job search. I also want to talk about the Purple Squirrel. You might have noticed that from our opening screen, and then we have it here again. It's kind of an interesting concept. So the Purple Squirrel began, or my understanding is it began as a term that recruiters would use to refer to people with highly specific and sometimes very kind of perhaps skill sets that might be at odds with each other. So for example, folks, who may be pivoting or transitioning say, well, I have this experience, but how does that go with this? But actually sometimes you really can be looking for things like that. My husband, for example, he works for a studio in localization, which means he works in subtitling and dubbing. And the job search that he was part of, or the hiring committee, came down to himself and another person. My husband can speak Mandarin, Japanese, and Spanish, and this position is to work with all of the Spanish-speaking territories and all of Asia. So he beat out another candidate who only spoke Mandarin and Spanish. So I find it very interesting to think about, right, what skills are people looking for? And so we encourage folks to either be, so the Purple Squirrel also can be somewhere a balance between, right, a generalist and a specialist. As I'm sure you may have already noticed, we have a lot of specialty programs at CGO. It's one of the things that makes us really special. So we have the theory of don't forget to, don't be afraid to specialize, but also being a generalist there too and making that sort of blend. So we encourage all of you to think of yourselves as purple squirrels with unique skill sets. So, and just in general too, so as I mentioned, we're now going to go through all of our resources. We're going to bombard you with those resources and talk a little bit about each one and see how they can help you along your career path. And let's see here. So the Cdo Road Map. This, as I mentioned, is a very intense document. I was looking at it last night with Bailey, so 16, I think, pages. And so I felt a little overwhelmed looking at it, but what I think the way it's best used, don't feel like you have to, fill out this document right away. This is something to really be thinking about building over time. So these are the steps it takes you through, going from the visioning, sort of the question mark, right? What do I want to do? Sort of identifying your own skills and potentially, as we mentioned earlier, some skills gaps. That can lead you along, hopefully, to, okay, getting a little bit more narrowed down, potentially to a couple different areas too, like, oh, I might want to work here, might want to work there. But then how do we actually get you into the profession, right? How do we actually get you that foot in the door? Things like that can be internships, apprenticeships, and of course, a lot of strategic networking. And then we're prepping you for the actual job search, which, we're going to talk a little bit more about later. I keep saying that, but it is true. We are going to talk about it later. So this is one of our resources that we like to use with students, just to have a little bit more of a, a little bit more of a concrete plan to help move you through grad school.
So 3 of the big resources that we use at the Career Development Office and that you can use on your own are this handshake that Theresa's referenced a couple of times already, something that's called Big Interview, and another platform called Going Global. So we're going to go through each one of these kind of one by one, and I'm going to let you know a little bit about their what makes them great. So Handshake, as Theresa said, is kind of like our landing page for many of the resources at the Career Development Office. So when you get your email through the school, you will be invited to join Handshake. So ahead of time, you may look into Handshake and they'll ask you for your school email. You cannot log in until you're invited. So hold off, it's coming, I promise, because it is kind of, or for me, it was exciting. It was one of the first resources that I really dove into when I started at CGU. So the landing page looks like this bottom image here with the blue top. And here is where you can navigate the whole website. You have an easy tab for finding jobs, events, as well as employers. The jobs tab, I think, is our most popular. You can go through, sort jobs by location, industry, salary, part-time, full-time, pretty much anything you can think of. There's a ton of opportunities on there. Events are really great because all of our CDO events are posted on there, as well as other professional development events. And then employers, if you're specifically curious about one employer, you can dive deep into their own profiles, see their hiring preferences, and things like that. Once you kind of explore this page, there's also an area that goes to our Career Center specific page. So if you look more towards the right, you see messages, Career Center, and a little icon image. So that's your personal profile section. That area you can upload your own resume, fill in your whole profile, including writing samples, past employment, and things like that. So employers within Handshake can look at your profile and send you messages, send you options, things like that. But if you hit this Career Center area or Career Center button, it'll take you to a page that looks like this top section. And here is where you can make an appointment with Theresa or Rebecca or any of our other career counselors in the future. We do, again, as she said, all sorts of different appointments. It's really great because you can schedule, you can see their schedule, pick what works for you, and it automatically schedules the Zoom, which is great. Resources, this is where you find things like that career roadmap. This is also where we can find things like sample CVs and resumes, the art of negotiation. There's a ton of different things. So as you're kind of going through this process, explore. There's a lot of different documents in there. Experiences is something I haven't used often, but if you do end up doing a lot of interviews through Handshake or finding opportunities through Handshake, you can record your specific experience on that interview of that employer, just to kind of keep track of what's been going on. And then finally, our favorite part, your least favorite part, our survey section. We love to hear from our students. We love to hear how we're doing, how we're serving you, how often we're serving you. So please help us out and take some surveys. Again, Handshake is one of the bigger platforms we use at CGU. You'll be able to find it on our My.cgu homepage once you're logged in as a student. So it's a pretty exciting platform.
And Bailey, if I may interject, just to build a little bit more upon what you're saying about your profile, we do encourage students to build this out. And the way I sort of refer to it, it sort of functions like a mini private LinkedIn page where, so when I say private, our version of Handshake is only available, we share it with all the other 7 Cs, the other Claremont colleges, but no one else. So it's really just the Claremont colleges. So in that way, I think that this can be really powerful in terms of finding those employers who are specifically seeking Claremont students. I think it's a really big deal to sort of, not just think about your affiliation with CGU on the smaller level, but also your bigger affiliation with all the other colleges on campus as well. So with that being said, I think a lot of people stress out, oh, well, I haven't filled my profile out yet, I can't book an appointment. Nope. You can still come in here and book an appointment with absolutely zero profile. We will still try to, peer pressure you to fill it out, but just want to let you know that you do not need a completed profile to use the services in here in terms of booking. We do hope you'll do that later if it you know, if you have the time and it behooves you, but really I just want you to remember, please still use the resources, even if you don't end up filling out your profile.
Perfect. Thanks, Theresa. Moving on to Big Interview. Big Interview is a recently new platform to us here at CGU. It's really cool in helping practice for interviews. So you can sign in again with your student email. And when you sign in, you'll see this top part here. Now you have your dashboard, you have a place that's called Learn. And here, this is where we have different lessons, different curriculums on interviewing. So they have a fast pace, and they also have kind of a slower pace that I think takes almost 16 hours. But they have quick lessons that you can do as well, all surrounding the topics of how to be a better interviewer, how to communicate with people. What's really cool about Big Interview is that it uses AI features to work with you and your video camera to capture your mannerisms. So it captures mannerisms that we often might think of as negative within a interview process, like our ums, or my moving around here like this, all of the things that interviewers may perceive as negative. And they help us build on them. They help us build on techniques to so that we don't do them, ways we can work on proper answers or prepare answers that we think to questions that we think are coming. So it's a really great tool to practice interviewing, even when you don't have an interview, because I think it's really great just for helping us practice our public speaking as well. What's great about the platform too is you can choose what type of interview you'd like. So you can choose time length, you can choose if you'd rather do a general interview, one that's industry based, one that's focused on your skill sets, or even one that's based on government industries. So it's a really, really cool tool to practice and kind of self-assess without that scary kind of third person, you know, it's just you and the computer at this point. And what's great is you can go back through and you can watch some of those videos if you have the stomach for it. I don't know that I do. But you can watch the videos, but the programming does track your progress. So the more you use it, the more it gets to know you, and the more it can track how you're doing. And for me, I think that's fun and a great way to improve on your interviewing and public speaking skills. So Big Interview, again, something you can sign into with your student email.
And just to add on to that as well, well, I guess to provide a counterpoint, I actually think that the ability to be able to review your own videos is super powerful. I hear you that it can be cringy, Bailey, but I think that especially even for myself, there are some things I wasn't really fully aware of. Like if I'm really nervous, I'm like flipping my hair everywhere, you know. I can even be a hair huffer, you know, like we don't want, my hair does smell really good, but no one really needs to know that, right? So I do think the self-awareness is really great. The AI I think is super cool too, especially with the counter, right? Letting those filler words. But yeah, for me personally, what I do feel is powerful is actually the self-awareness component, right? I always put my hair back during interviews now. So thank you so much though, Bailey. So our next resource we're going to talk about is called Going Global. That one, Bailey, next slide whenever you get a chance. That one is also brand new to us. Big Interview is a little bit newer, especially the AI function is newer to us. But Going Global, this one's brand new. So I've actually just recently started exploring this myself with one of our alumni who was interviewing in Texas. And as it just so happens, I think there were 3 different city guides just in Texas there. So Going Global is for both international and domestic students, and it's for folks who may want to interview even here. There's a Los Angeles guide, right? Or, folks who might want to be moving to different parts of this country. It can also, in terms of international students, that can be give you some great insight. If you, there's probably the most powerful thing about it. It has a list of employers that do sponsor visas. So if you're someone who is an international student with an interest in potentially staying here in the US after you've concluded your graduate studies, there is a list of employers that can sponsor you to stay here. So that is a really powerful one, really powerful tool in there. And yeah, so perhaps maybe you're international, but you want to go to another country, not your country of origin or the US. There's a lot of guides in there too. So when I was looking at the one for Texas with the alum the other day, I found it actually really helpful. It talks even about some different social norms and cultural differences, which I think can be very important, especially for international students or domestic students who are looking to go abroad. And the way it works, by the way, because initially I was a little cynical, like, well, how do you know? Are you just dealing with like stereotypes or whatever? But it's not that. They actually employ folks like myself. They employ career professionals to sort of local career professionals in the different areas to really be a resource and to create these resources and guides. So I think that this is really powerful as a site here. Another really helpful thing, we're looking at the cost of living. I think that can be a really important thing to know. So yeah, this is a great one for international students and domestic students that I hope, I'm looking forward to exploring it more myself. I think it's actually a pretty impressive site. So I hope this will be helpful to y'all later on in your careers. So then we're going to talk a little bit about, I mentioned the bombardment of resources. Well, this is one of the things that I often talk to students about in an initial meeting with the Career Development Office. So we are absolutely a big part of your team, and I hope that you'll engage with us. But there's also these other folks as well, right? So there's really a lot of pieces of the puzzle, if you will, just in terms of your academia and pursuits at student pursuits at CGU. So for example, everyone will be assigned a academic advisor. You definitely want to make that person your friend because that person can guide you to let you know sort of what classes can really be most enriching for you. Of course, there's some gray areas, some blurred lines perhaps between academic and career advising, right? Because when you have sort of narrowed down a certain career path, you want to be taking certain courses that can help you get there, right? But of course, we would love to, having your advisor on board is so important. There's also your program coordinator or administrator. This person is often the one who sends out job opportunities that were forwarded by alumni of the program. The program coordinator or administrator is definitely someone you want to get friendly with as well. They can be super helpful in your job search because a lot of times they're the staff, liaison, right? So they're working with faculty, they're working with students and alumni, so they can be super helpful to you as well. Of course, and just in general too, faculty, especially if you feel, a connection with a certain, professor and you really want to get to know them better, things like that. I think building those relationships can be really important, and especially trying to make as good an impression as you can, because remembering in the future, a recommendation from your professor can be super powerful. And also just in general, if your relationship with that professor gets to the point where they might feel comfortable introducing you to their network, that's also incredibly powerful. Because as I mentioned previously, we do have highly specialized programs here at CGU, but the other part of it too, we do have that focus on being in the field, like Bailey was talking about. A lot of people, of course, that field is teaching, but I personally, one of the phrases that angers me the most, those who can do, those who can't teach, that makes me highly angry, and I think it's incredibly wrong, right? But we actually have folks who are doing both, right? So folks who are in the field who can really help you get that foot in the door and make those connections. So the other one, of course, I will, maybe I shouldn't give it away because I might end up doing this at orientation if we end up in person at all, but in terms of peers and advanced students, one of the cheesy things I do at orientation often is say, okay, look to your left, look to your right, when we're in person with a group of other people. Remember that. But to really say, okay, look around, take a look around the room. This is your new network. And cheesy though that is, I really do mean it. And I hope that, sometimes, some stuff can come up. You might have a conflict, with a student, especially, we mentioned there's a whole lot of group work, right? So that can be sometimes fuel for conflicts, like you didn't do your part of the paper, people get a little mad at each other, which I do understand. But we really want to keep in mind that these, we don't know when burning a bridge could hurt us, right? So just trying to keep it super professional, and really not just keep it professional in case there's a conflict, but really be thinking about, I really don't want you to think about the other students in your class as your competition, because that attitude won't help anybody. I'd love for you to develop an attitude of how can I build reciprocal relationships? How can we help each other? And to really be viewing yourselves as partners and network in the field, not as, well, that person's going to get the job I want. So I hope that's a helpful perspective. And of course here too, so this is, this slide here, we're talking about really getting involved too. So not just, okay, I went to class and left, right? But attending conferences, presenting at them when you get the opportunity to do so, when you feel advanced enough to do that, publishing. I think that, so these two things, I know that might be intimidating right now, especially for those who may have come right from undergrad, or those who don't have too much work experience, like, oh God, what am I going to say to conference? But I think that actually you will have a lot to offer, and I encourage you to think about that. And as Bailey was saying, to work on those, wow, as I say, right? To work on those public speaking skills, right? So I think that would be great. Another thing here, so building strategic relationships. This is an area that we can really help you with at the CDO. As I mentioned, I've got some of those real top tips. I spend, it feels like about maybe a quarter to a half of my day on LinkedIn, and I'm super connector on there. So happy to connect you with other folks when I can, or you can also request introductions if you want to connect with me. So things like that, to really be thinking again about building these reciprocal relationships. And so we talked in our last slide, right, about building those within CGU, but also to be thinking about, well, yeah, are there professors who are in the same field at one of the other undergrad institutions, or maybe at the other graduate institution at Keck? Are there other folks that you can really be talking to and building and expanding your network in an intentional manner? So we could have a whole meeting about that, so I won't bore you. But definitely encourage you to do that, again, beyond just the scope of what other folks are talking about in the prior slide. And so, yeah, so this is something, our next bullet point here on self-promotion, that can be something that folks get a little uncomfortable with. And I do understand that, because I feel like there's different societal pressures. And I know, again, I mentioned earlier, cultural differences too, where a lot of either cultures, oh, well, you want to be very humble and you don't want to talk about your own accomplishments. I also think there's other factors at play there. For example, women and other female identified folks in the US, there can be this sort of, oh, don't talk about yourself, right? It's really about other people, right? So I really encourage you to think about your past accomplishments with pride, to take pride in your accomplishments. And I don't want you to feel like, oh, I have to be, pume, salesman, like, car salesman, right? Used car salesman. I'm so whatever, right? Because I think getting into that kind of attitude can bring up the imposter syndrome, right? So this isn't about creating a false sense of, self-inflated, ego. This is really just about knowing your own worth and knowing your brand and seeing how you can really present that to others. So we'll do, we have some materials already. I'm sure we'll be doing another workshop on elevator pitches. That's a great intro way to, of course, again, remember being in person, remember ever being in an elevator. But the term's a little bit outdated even before COVID. But anyway, so the concept being, right, you might, you're on an elevator, someone may step in, you recognize them, maybe at a conference or maybe out in the wild, who knows, maybe CGU, and you say, oh, wow, that's so-and-so, I'd love to meet that person. And then you only have what, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute before, because you don't know when they'll be getting off the elevator, right? So it's a really short little introductory talk that you do about yourself, to really be introducing yourself. It's also a wonderful way to answer that most interviews I've had start off with some version of the tell us a little bit about yourself question, some version of that. So it's a great way to be ready, to really be talking about yourself and to really, again, being proud of your accomplishments. So I hope that will be a helpful perspective for y'all.
So we've talked a lot about the resources that we can offer at the Career Development Office, but there are some other resources on campus that can definitely help you thrive. So some some resources that are specific to CGU that you can find online, and that I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about at orientation, are the Center for Writing and Rhetoric. This is a great option for if you're stuck on a paper, if you're stuck on a topic, if you want someone to edit. They help you with writing at every step of the way, or whatever stage you're at. And the students there are super friendly. They usually make their rounds the first week of class to kind of pop into each classrooms and say hi. So if they do that, make sure you get their email and engage with them. They're awesome. We have the Office of Student Life, Diversity, and Leadership. This is usually called the SLDL office. And this is a place where many of our student groups come to meet. So SLDL will kind of facilitate student groups, work with them to give workshops, different diversity trainings, a place to connect with your peers. They have a mentorship program. They have all sorts of different options there, as well as kind of a fun building to hang out, comfy couches. So it's a cool place to be. We have Preparing Future Faculty. So if you are one of those folks who are inspired by academia and you want to be a faculty member one day, this is kind of CGU's answer to TAing. So many grad school students often get experience TAing, and that'll translate into faculty positions. But since we don't do that at CGU, this is a way, it's a 2-semester certificate program that proves that you can create curriculum as well as teach within a classroom. We have Transdisciplinary Studies. This is a great area for those of us maybe who may not be interested in the faculty route. It allows us to explore between the schools. There's really great professors in this area. So if you're interested or think that you're kind of on the cusp of your school, check out Transdisciplinary Studies. We have Monsoor. This is our counseling service center. So you can schedule counseling appointments there, and they do also have a crisis center. And then we have the Office of Disability Services. So if you have any sort of disability accommodations, screen readers, things like that, that you would like to get for classes and coursework, the Office of Disability Services is who you contact. And then finally, oh yeah, in addition to the CGU resources, we have our 7C resources. So because CGU is located within the 7 Cs, we're lucky enough to be able to explore some of their resources and things that have been around. So if you're interested, there are groups like the Office of Black Student Affairs. We've got Chicano Latino Student Affairs, the Queer Resource Center, the 7 Cs, Asian American Advisory Board, and the Intercollegiate Feminist Center. So this is part of finding that group, finding that network, finding people to share ideas and experiences with. So we just wanted to provide you with those resources as you head into your time at CGU.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bailey. So we have one question I see in the chat from Gloria. And by the way, if anyone else has questions, please feel free, use the chat, or if you'd like, we're done with our more formal programming now. That was our last slide, right, Bailey? Yeah. So please feel free if you'd like to unmute yourself or come on video. But first, let's talk about Gloria's question. So Gloria was asking about PFF. So by the way, we probably should have put all the little initialisms on here. We have a whole lot of, like Bailey was mentioning SLDL, right? PFF, like what? Actually, maybe that's a good resource we should put together. Actually, I think I do have a resource listing all of our initialisms, so I could provide that to y'all too if you'd like. Maybe we should put that up on Handshake. But anyhow, so the question is about PFF, asking if these classes are taken along with regular classes or after the program is completed. And Bailey, correct me if I'm wrong. So my understanding is that it is a 2-semester program, but these classes are not taken for credit. Is that your understanding as well?
Exactly. So it's a 2-semester program. The first semester is focusing more largely on like the curriculum development, and the second more in classroom work. They do offer it, I believe they offer both each semester, or you can take an extended or an accelerated summer version. But it would be, you'd take one semester, one the other, in addition to whatever your coursework would be.
Awesome. PFF is really powerful. I have not participated myself, but just even sometimes looking at their workshop titles, they impress me, as well as their leadership. Shamini and Shelby, they are both fantastic. So I really hope that for those of you who are interested in the professorship track, that you will think about PFF, because it's incredibly powerful and meaningful. So. All right, well, I think if there aren't any other questions, I guess we are time to wrap it up. I really want to thank all of you for taking the time to meet with us. And again, all of my thanks to Bailey for putting this presentation together, and Kajal for advertising it so well. I'm so glad to have both of you on board here. I'm also very much looking forward to working with, hopefully getting to work with all of you, all of our webinar attendees here as the school year begins. So I'm going to put my email into the chat just because it's a little bit different. I have my middle initial because I'm cool and special. It's not that, it's because I was a student too, and they need to differentiate between staff and student email accounts. So here's my email address. We'll also be sending a follow-up email with all of these links. I know we, as I told you, I hope that I warned you sufficiently that we were going to bombard you with resources, but we will be sending an email out with those resources that you will be able to access once you're enrolled with and you have a student CGU email account.
We're going to also include a short survey in that email. So that'd be great.
Yes, we know those are irritating, but that really does help us. You know, as you may know, CGU has a big focus on evaluation and really focusing on data and using it to improve. So if we don't know that it's a problem, we can't fix it, right? And we also love to hear compliments about how wonderful we are too. So good or bad, we'd love to hear what you really think. Fantastic. So if there's not anything else, Bailey, I think we're done here. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. It's so great to hear from all of you, and so glad that you joined us here today. I will leave you with the thought that was always my former director's. It was her email signature. It's never too early to begin planning your career, and we're here to help you every step of the way. So looking forward to working with all of you. Bye now.